32,000 men answered Gideon's call to war, and the God of Israel looked at them, outnumbered 4-1, and said, "Too many, send them home." This is the biblical story of Gideon, and the strangest order any commander has ever been given. His enemy filled the valley below, their camels past counting, like sand on the seashore. And God's one problem with Gideon's army was that it was too big. Why would God look at odds like those and choose to make them worse? 22,000 went home the first morning. 9,700 more followed, until 300 men stood on a dark hillside, their hands too full to hold a sword, a trumpet in one hand, in the other, an empty clay jar with fire hidden inside it. The story begins with the man God would call mighty, hiding, threshing wheat, at the bottom of a hole in the ground. For 7 years before that night, the people of Israel had been hiding in caves in their own land. They had done evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hands of Midian. Every season Israel planted, and every harvest the Midianites came, with the Amalekites and the peoples of the east. They swarmed the land like locusts. They spared nothing living, not a sheep, not an ox, not a donkey, until a free people, in their own promised land, were digging shelters in the mountain clefts and hiding in them. And when Israel finally cried out, the Lord sent not an army, a prophet, with a hard message. "I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I told you not to worship the gods of the land you live in, but you have not listened to me." The rescue was coming. But first, Israel had to remember whose rescue it would have to be, because it was about to begin in the least promising place, with the least promising man. Now come down to one man, at the bottom of a hole in the ground. A winepress was a pit sunk into the rock, low, out of the wind. The worst place in the world to thresh wheat. Threshing needs the open wind. And that is where Scripture finds Gideon, beating out wheat in secret, hiding his family's food from the raiders. He was no general. He was not even brave. And beyond his hillside, Midian was still in the land, and it was harvest time again. Then a stranger sat down beneath the great oak and greeted him with the most unexpected words in the story. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Mighty warrior, spoken to a man hiding in a pit. And Gideon, honest to the bone, did not bow. He argued, "Pardon me, my Lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? The Lord brought us up out of Egypt, but now he has abandoned us." And the Lord said, "Go in the strength you have, and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Gideon did the arithmetic out loud. "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The least man of the weakest clan, hiding in a hole in the ground. And the answer came back, quiet as the oak shade, "I will be with you." Gideon brought an offering and laid it on a rock. The stranger reached out the tip of his staff and touched it, and fire rose up out of the bare rock and consumed it all. And the visitor was gone. And Gideon understood, terror flooding through him, who had sat under his oak. But the Lord spoke peace over his fear. "Do not be afraid. You are not going to die." And Gideon built an altar on that spot and named it, "The Lord is Peace." God did not wait for Gideon to become a mighty warrior to call him one. He named the man while he was still hiding. God's first order to his new warrior was not aimed at Midian at all, but at his own front yard. That night the Lord told him, "Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Build a proper altar to the Lord and offer your father's second bull on it, the bull 7 years old, with the wood of the pole for the fire." Before Israel could be delivered from Midian, It had to be delivered from the gods that had brought Midian. Gideon obeyed, all of it, that night. But he did it in the dark, afraid of his family, afraid of his own town. The mighty warrior demolished an idol by night, terrified the whole time. In the morning, the town found Baal's altar in pieces, and they wanted blood. Bring out your son. He must die. And it was Gideon's own father, Joash, the man who owned the altar, who turned the mob away. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. Baal never did. And from that day, Gideon carried a new name, Jerubbaal. Let Baal contend with him. He was still afraid, but he was learning the lesson under the whole story. Obedience does not wait for courage. Then the enemy moved. The Midianites, the Amalekites, and the peoples of the east crossed the Jordan together and spread across the valley of Jezreel. One raid from finishing the nation for good. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and the words are staggering. The Spirit of the Lord clothed himself with Gideon. The presence of God put on the least man like a garment and wore him. Gideon set a trumpet to his lips, and Israel answered. From Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, the fighting men came down, until 32,000 stood behind the man from the pit. And that night, with an army at his back at last, the old fear came back. If you will really save Israel by my hand, he prayed, look, I am laying a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If the dew falls on the fleece alone, and all the ground stays dry, then I will know. Morning came. The ground was dry, and Gideon wrung a whole bowl full of water out of the wool. It should have been enough. It wasn't. Do not be angry with me, he prayed again. Let me ask just once more. This time, let the fleece stay dry, and let the dew soak the ground. Stop there. A man holding God's own promise asking for the same miracle twice. What God does with a doubter like that is the whole measure of him. That night, God, who owed this trembling man nothing, did exactly that, down to the dew. He did not scold the doubter. He answered him, twice. The doubting was nearly over now. What came next was harder than doubt. At dawn, Gideon's army camped at the spring of Harod. The valley floor below was a sea of tents, outnumbered 4-1. Put yourself where Gideon stood. You would pray for exactly one thing, more men. And this is when the Lord chose to say the strangest thing in the story. You have too many men. Too many. Then God explained, and the explanation unlocks everything. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel will boast against me that her own strength has saved her. So God ordered the army cut, announced to the men, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and go home. Gideon gave the order, and 22,000 men rose and walked away. 2 out of every 3, gone before the fight. 10,000 remained, and God said, still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there. So Gideon watched his men drink. Most knelt down and drank their fill, but 300 scooped the water up in their hands and lapped it. God is about to choose an army by how it drinks, the ones who knelt or the ones who lapped, and nothing about either group tells you which. And the Lord said, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you, and give the Midianites into your hands. Scripture never explains the test. Maybe that is the point. It was never about which men were better, only about how few. So Gideon sent 9,700 more home, keeping 300 and the trumpets of all the rest. Remember those trumpets. 300 men against an army Scripture counts at 135,000 swords, 450-1. His army was finally weak enough to be used. At night, the command came, "Get up, go down against the camp. I am going to give it into your hands." And then God added something tender. "But if you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp first with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying. If you are afraid." God knew his mighty warrior. 2 men crept down the black slope, alone against 135,000, close enough to hear voices inside the tents, and the voice they heard was a soldier whispering to his friend, "I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into our camp. It struck a tent so hard that the tent turned over and fell flat. A loaf of bread, barley, the poor man's grain, the food this army had spent 7 years stealing from Israel's fields." And listen to what the friend answered. "That can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. The enemy knew his name. A horde lay awake in the dark, dreaming of its own defeat, while the man it feared stood outside the tent wall, listening. And the fear that had followed Gideon from the winepress finally broke. When he heard the dream and what it meant, he bowed down where he stood and worshipped. He climbed back to his 300 and woke them with a sentence with no doubt left in it. "Get up. The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." Gideon split his 300 into 3 companies. Then he armed them with the strangest weapons ever issued. Into every man's hands went a trumpet, the trumpets of the men who went home, and an empty clay jar with a burning torch hidden inside it, and ringed them around the sleeping camp. We have seen this God bring down a city's walls without a single sword stroke. The walls fell to trumpets and a shout. This time, he goes further. His army will not even march. No spear in hand, no shield, no sword drawn. 300 points of fire sealed inside clay so the night stayed perfectly black. Stand in that ring, a sword in your hand or a torch and an empty jar. One of those is what 300 men actually carried. "Watch me," Gideon told them. "Follow my lead. When we blow our trumpets, blow yours, all around the camp, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." It was the middle watch. The sentries had just changed when Gideon reached the edge of the camp and gave the signal. 300 trumpets screamed out of the darkness at once. 300 jars shattered against the rocks, and in one instant, a ring of fire blazed up around the whole camp. And 300 voices roared as one, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The sword they shouted about. Not one of them swung it that night. Scripture says each man stood still in his place, torches high, trumpets sounding, and the camp below tore itself apart. Men past counting woke blind, fire on every horizon, war horns from every direction. Certain a vast army was already inside, and the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn their swords on each other. And the survivors ran, with Israel's fighting men pouring down from the hills in pursuit. The battle for the camp was over before the sun came up, and Gideon's 300 had never drawn a blade that night. Israel came to Gideon and offered him a crown. "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, for you have saved us from Midian." And the man from the winepress gave the answer the story had been teaching him. "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." "You have the wrong hero," he was telling them, and he could prove it. God had removed every other explanation. He chose the least man of the weakest clan, so the victory could not be Gideon's greatness. He cut 32,000 men down to 300, so it could not be Israel's strength. And the weapons that won were trumpets, clay jars, and torchlight. so it could not even be Israel's swords, until the only explanation left standing was God. The army was never too big to win. It was too big to know who had won. Centuries later, when the New Testament calls the roll of faith, Gideon stands in that list by name. Not the Gideon of the ring of fire, the Gideon of the winepress, the frightened, doubting, honest man who obeyed while he was still afraid. Tell me in the comments, which would have taken more faith, to stand on that dark hillside with the 300, or to be one of the thousands God sent home. And the God of Israel was not finished answering by fire. Generations later, it would fall from heaven itself onto an altar drenched in water before a watching nation. But that story is still ahead. So the land had peace for 40 years. And somewhere in those years, a man who had once threshed wheat at the bottom of a hole stood in an open field at harvest, in the wind, unafraid, because God had looked at everything Gideon was not and called him mighty.